Well, over the years, I've accused some of my atheist interlocutors on YouTube in a kind of a playful spirit of being secret Herods. And what I mean is, Herod arrested John the Baptist. He was opposed to him, but then the Bible tells us he loved to listen to John the Baptist preach. So I've kind of teased my atheist interlocutors who come on my sites all the time and leave all sorts of acerbic remarks and so on, that actually you're a secret Herod, that you claim to be opposed to religion, but you like secretly to listen, as I speak about the things of God. Well, I'll confess that there's kind of a reverse Herod syndrome for me in regard to Christopher Hitchens, who just died a few days ago, the great polemical writer. Though Hitchens was the most outspoken opponent of religion in the last 25 years, though I was often infuriated by him because of his cavalier and insulting dismissal of what I hold most dear, I will confess that I love to listen to him. I think I watched every Hitchens debate that was available on YouTube, and there were a lot of them. I've read, I think, most of his books. In fact, when he died, one of the books I was reading was Arguably, which is this brick-sized collection of essays from Hitchens. I subscribe to Vanity Fair magazine pretty much because Hitchens wrote for it on a regular basis. Whenever I could see him or read him or peruse his ideas, I would. So I love to listen to him. Part of that was what the Romans called a gaudium de stilo, which is the joy that we take simply in style. I don't know if there was a better writer on the scene today than Christopher Hitchens. No matter what he was talking about, it could be about politics in Greece, it could be about defending his friend Salman Rushdie, it could be trying to convince people that their belief in God was childish. No matter what it was, Hitchens always wrote with extraordinary intelligence, perceptiveness, grace, wit, style. So that was part of it, was just the joy in style. The other thing I liked about him so much was that his self was always massively there. And I mean this now in a positive way, that there was nothing detached about a Hitchens essay or speech. His acerbic, witty, cocksure self was always there. You knew you were dealing with this personality. And I kind of appreciated that in his writing. Also, we had very similar interests. He hated religion, but man, was he interested in religion. He came back to it all the time. He loved contemporary politics, as I do. He also loved Evelyn Waugh, the great Catholic novelist, as I do. And maybe above all, he loved Bob Dylan, who's one of my great heroes. And so we often had, similar interests. I also loved watching Hitchens over the years on TV programs, news programs, because he was very hard to pin down ideologically. Just when you'd think, oh, he's a man of the left, he'd say something remarkably conservative and vice versa. So I used to love watching him with kind of befuddled newscasters trying to get a handle on this absolutely unique personality. Now, here's the main reason, though, why I like Christopher Hitchens. All that's just kind of preliminary. The main reason was because of his deep religiosity. And now I realize that requires a little bit of explanation. And I'll begin with what I think was Hitchens' great mistake when it comes to God. I've done other videos about this, so you might look at those for more detail. But
all right, stick around to hear the response of what Bishop Barron thinks about Christopher Hitchens and his deep religiosity. One of the things that I want to stop and just reflect upon for a second here is a principle that we're watching Bishop Barron display before our very eyes. And it's this idea that just because somebody disagrees with us doesn't mean we have to demonize them. Bishop Barron, of course, is a Catholic bishop, a Catholic priest. He is a cleric in the hierarchy of the Roman Catholic Church. Christopher Hitchens is an atheist. He's a writer. He's very, very antagonistic to Christianity and to religion. He often talks about how religion is often the perpetrator of violence in the world. That's one of the things that I've heard a lot of Christopher Hitchens talk about. These two could not be any more different. But here we see a Catholic bishop, Bishop Barron, telling us all of the things that he appreciates about Christopher Hitchens. He's humbly confessing that he is attracted to, in a sense, Christopher Hitchens. One thing we can learn from Bishop Barron in this clip is that just because somebody disagrees with us doesn't mean we have to demonize them. And the Christian ethic, rather, as my lights go out, the Christian ethic, rather, is to find the good even in our enemies. Jesus said to love our enemies and pray for our enemies. This is what we should be doing as Christians. All right, let's see what Bishop Barron has to say now on Christopher Hitchens.
Like Dawkins and Sam Harris and many others, Hitchens consistently misconstrued what serious religious people mean when they say God. Time and again, Christopher Hitchens, and now his millions of disciples, I hear from them almost every day, refer to God as, a sky fairy, your invisible friend, the flying spaghetti monster, meaning some crazy mythological fantasy for which there's absolutely no evidence. They would also excoriate, Hitchens did it all the time, excoriate religious people for what they call the God of the gaps. That there's a gap in our present scientific explanation, so let's put God in there. And then as science advances, God retreats to ever smaller gaps in the explanatory system. So over and over again, you hear that criticism from Hitchens. See, but here's the thing. All of that is wide of the mark. All of that misses what we mean when we say God. God is not a being in the world. The creator of the entire universe is not ingredient in the universe, is not an item among many within the universe. God is not some reality for which there may or may not be evidence. Is there a moon around Jupiter? Well, or moons around Jupiter, let's check and see. There are or there aren't. See, God isn't like that, some being in the world. Thomas Aquinas made the decisive distinction when he said God is not en summum, highest being, but ipsum esse, the sheer act of to be itself. God is the reason why there's something rather than nothing. God's the reason why there is the nexus of condition causality at all. And see, what it means is God is not a true thing, but the truth itself. God's not a good thing among many. God is goodness itself. God is not one just state of affairs. God is justice itself. And see, once we get this clear, we can see what I mean when I say Christopher Hitchens is profound, or was profoundly religious. Something you see now, book after book, essay after essay, speech after speech. Christopher Hitchens was passionate for justice. Go back to his earliest book on Greece and Cyprus, as he advocates the position of the oppressed. Look at his writings on Palestine. Look at his writings on Salman Rushdie. Look at his writings on the Iraq War. Whatever it was this deep and abiding passion to set things right. He was a profoundly moral man, I would say, even moralizing, intense sense of what's right and what's just. See, here's the point. That is the sign that someone has been grasped by the unconditioned just. See, think about this for a second. If there's no God at all, there's no God, we're just dumbly here by vague chance. The universe just spins along in utter indifference to human cruelty, human nobility. One day, this whole earth will just be incinerated. All of us just live for a short time and then we fade away. If that's the case, truly, why would you care about justice? Why would you care, ultimately? Wouldn't, in fact, Dostoevsky be right in saying, if there is no God, then anything is permitted? See? Those who burn with a passion for justice, I would argue, have a keen sense of an absolute, unconditioned criterion of justice, which I would call God. The unconditioned just is what we mean by God. And see, I saw that on display in practically everything that Christopher Hitchens wrote. He was battling sky fairies and flying spaghetti monsters. Fine, I'd battle those too. He claims there's no evidence for some mythological supreme being. I agree with him. But see, what I caught behind his rhetoric always was this passion for God, not to put too fine a point on it. Just a last observation. It was right after his cancer diagnosis became public. I did a piece for the CNN blog, and I urged my fellow Christians to pray for Christopher Hitchens. Is he the enemy of religion? Yes, I said, but we should love our enemies. You know, he's a fellow human being, and we should pray for him. Okay, I thought it was a very benign article. It was met with this avalanche of negative commentary. Thousands of people telling me, you know, to lay off of Christopher Hitchens and not to cover him up with my medieval mumbo jumbo and keep your prayers to yourself, etc., etc. Well, I can happily say I didn't agree with any of that. I didn't follow it. I did pray for Christopher Hitchens all during his illness. When I heard of his death, I was saddened, and I prayed for him that day and have continued to. I'm praying for him not just as someone I admired as a writer, but someone who I think was, despite himself, a religious man.
That is a very interesting take on Christopher Hitchens. Bishop Barron is saying that Christopher Hitchens is in fact a very religious man, and he's grounding it in justification. The idea that Christopher Hitchens loves and desires for justice. Interestingly, Bishop Barron is using kind of that argument against atheism, for example, that's often used as the moral argument. For example, if atheism were true, there would be no right and wrong, for example. And Bishop Barron is paralleling that with this idea of justice. If atheism is true, justice would cease to exist because everything would be random. There would be no sense of right and wrong. There would be no cohesiveness to the universe. There would be no transcendental God. There would only be mythical super pies in the sky. But if theism is true, and there is a God that has generated and produced everything in the world that we see, and he's produced humans and created them in his image, and they are meant to subdue the earth and create a flourishing world, society, then justice makes sense, because that would be contrary, it would be injustice, and therefore it would be contrary to God's will. If atheism is true, there's nothing like that. There's no way to make sense of, there's no way to grasp a hold of the reality, the universal objective truth that all human beings not only desire justice, but as C.S. Lewis often talks about, we all inherently know it's true, because the moment there's an injustice perpetrated against us, we immediately cry out for justice. We cry out for justice to fall and to be done, just as Christopher Hitchens is doing. So maybe C.S. Lewis and Christopher Hitchens aren't so different after all. And so I guess I concord with Bishop Barron in saying that I guess, and humbly confess, that Christopher Hitchens was in fact a religious man. All right, that's all I have for this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe. Remember that Christianity is Christ, and without him, there is no Christianity. See you in the next one. Peace.